Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of The Fall of Icarus. This will be Part 16, Chapter 16, entitled Icarus and Apollo Reunite. The fun has arrived, Midnight shouted, coming into the apartment-like dorm. Hi, Midnight-sensei, Izuku called out from where he was laying on the couch with Eri. Keyword was. Eri jumped up and ran to the front door with a screech. Auntie Nem! Hey, Sprout, Midnight chuckled. Izuku paused their movie and twisted on the couch so he could look into the hallway without aggravating any of his injuries. Recovery Girl had been very strict while assessing and attending to his injuries about his month-long arrest. He was malnourished, bruised, and broken. She'd been able to heal the broken ribs and arm, but the bruises and malnourishment remained as he hadn't had enough stamina. Midoriya-kun, Midnight called as she finally came into view. I am so sorry about everything. It was such a mess. Izuku chuckled nervously. It's all right, Midnight. It wasn't your fault. No more of that Midnight stuff, Midnight demanded, making Izuku freeze like a deer in the headlights. I am your designated wine aunt now. Call me Auntie Nemuri, or Auntie Nem, or Nemi like Eri does. Izuku relaxed and smiled at her. Are you sure? Well, if Eri is Sho and Zashi's daughter and she's my niece, then you're my nephew now, Midnight Nemuri explained. Therefore, I get full aunt privileges. As in you get to do all the fun stuff, but then you get to leave at the end of the day, Izuku asked with a chuckle. Nemuri snapped her fingers at him. Exactly right, kid. Now, I was given the rundown of your injuries and everything, but I'm assuming you've been getting restless, having to essentially be on bed rest since you've gotten out. Yeah, kinda, Izuku muttered. He was extremely thankful that Namasa had gotten him out of the HPSC's hands, and that Aizawa and Hizashi had taken him in and gained custody of him. But it was true that he'd gotten a bit restless. Eri and he had made a list of which movies they wanted to watch first, and had gone back and forth adding them while the credits for Princess Mononoke played. They'd also watched Spirited Away, My Neighbor Totoro, and Kiki's Delivery Service the night before, and they'd been watching Howl's Moving Castle since they woke up. So, it's a good thing that I got left in charge, then, Nemuri cheered, clapping her hands together. I've already invited your friends over, but I haven't told them that they're all coming because you're here, so it's a big surprise. Ooh, they are so going to freak out about your new look, too. You... what? Really? Izuku shouted, jumping up from the couch and immediately wincing. They're coming, though. Nemuri chuckled. I wouldn't pull any prank like that with you, kiddo. Auntie Nemi likes pranks, but she doesn't prank about important stuff, Eri said with a seriousness that Izuku wasn't expecting. When are they coming? Izuku asked, taking both their words for it. Nemuri pulled out her phone and checked the time. I guess any A knock sounded at the door and made the three of them jump. I guess that's them now, Nemuri chuckled. I'll get the door. Why don't you hide or something? Make it a real surprise. Izuku panicked again and looked back and forth between the door and Nemuri as Eri giggled. Run, Oni-san, Eri Whisper yelled, waving her hands at him to hurry. Izuku tripped over the blanket from the couch before he got back to his feet, Nemuri approaching the door and yelling at his friends to stop banging on the door. He could hear Eri jumping on the couch and turning the TV back on as he hid behind the kitchen counter, and Nemuri finally opened the door. Hey, kiddos, perfect timing. I was just telling Eri-chan that I invited you all over, Nemuri greeted as the door opened. Why are we here, Midnight-sensei? Shoto asked, and Izuku almost jumped from his hiding spot at that moment. Your invitation was very cryptic. Do you just want us to watch Eri for you or something? Hitoshi asked. We ain't babysitters, Kachan hissed, causing Izuku's breath to stop for a moment. Someone's excited to see his boyfriend, Nana teased. Shut up, Izuku hissed. We'd rather not, Yoichi chuckled. This is the most entertaining thing we've had in years. My life is not some soap opera, Izuku complained. Just come on in, Nemuri told his friends. You'll see why I invited you soon enough. Did no one seriously tell them that you got out? Second asked. He's only been out for a little over 24 hours, Second, Banjo laughed. They probably wanted to do something like this anyways. I want to see Eri, May shouted. Izuku could hear her pushing past everyone to get to the living room, until he could see her run past, and he had to duck behind the counter again. He waited until he saw Hitoshi, Shoto, and then finally Kacchan pass by. Namuri was closing the door when Izuku snuck from his hiding spot and walked up behind Kacchan. Hitoshi turned around and his eyes widened when he saw Izuku, but Izuku quickly cut across his neck before Kacchan noticed. Hitoshi smirked and watched as Izuku jumped and landed on Kacchan's back, earning a string of curses and getting thrown off of him. Luckily, Hitoshi was ready and caught him. Kid, you could have gotten more hurt with that move, Nana sighed. Who cares? Yoichi screeched, cackling. That was pretty hilarious, and chuckled, surprising everyone. Izuku! Kacchan shouted, running forward and pulling him into a hug. Hi, Kacchan, Izuku whispered with a small smile, as the vestiges cooed in his mind, vaguely hearing Namuri and Eri's giggles in the background. When'd you get out? Hitoshi asked. What happened to your hair? Shoto asked. Izuku pulled away from the hug reluctantly and turned to face his friends. Hitoshi was standing there with his arms crossed and an unimpressed yet relieved look on his face. Shoto's arm was smoking, as if he'd been prepared to burn Izuku if he was a villain, and May was standing with Eri in her arms, jaw dropped. Sometime last night, Izuku said, rubbing the back of his neck nervously. And I had to cut my hair to even be able to properly wash it after a month of no showers. Why didn't you come to see us sooner? Kacchan asked, grabbing him around the waist and looking down at him. That's actually our doing, Namuri interjected. Izuku is on house arrest since he won't allow us to put him on bed rest. It's not that bad, Auntie Nem. Izuku sighed, hoping she wouldn't bring up that he had had 3 broken ribs and a fractured arm. Kacchan's arm squeezed tighter, and he froze as he realized what he let slip. At least she wouldn't bring up his injuries. Namuri screeched excitedly, also after having frozen in realization. Eri! He did it! He did! Eri yelled excitedly, right along with her. You officially have another nephew! Izuku dropped his face into his hands, and a rosy blush covered his face. Okay, hold on, May said. There is way too much happening right now, even for me. Shoto and Hisashi adopted Izuku as soon as he agreed, Namuri explained. That was, what, right before he got released from the commission? Yeah, Izuku nodded, finally looking up again. When Naomasa and Nezu went to talk to Madam President, Aizawa and Yamada asked if I wanted them to adopt me. They told me that you all went to my mom's. I'm sorry you had to deal with her. Don't be sorry, Shoto said. We had no idea what your home life was like. We would have gotten you out a lot sooner if we had, Hitoshi agreed. Why didn't you ever just come over to mine? Kacchan asked. You know the old hag would have loved to have you over. Izuku shrugged. I didn't want to burden you guys, plus she would have gotten worse if I left again. Again? Hitoshi asked. Where did you go before? Izuku froze again, looking around as everyone looked at him in confusion, besides Namuri and Hitoshi, who had a kindling of understanding and sadness in their eyes. Did you go to the streets, kid? Third asked. Izuku nodded, and there was a litany of angry responses in his head. What did the assholes in your head ask you, Izuku? Kacchan asked, voice tense. Well... Izuku couldn't get the words out of his mouth, and dropped his eyes down to the floor. Hitoshi walked over to stand in front of him, and grabbed his hands, effectively getting him to look up again. Izu, did you sleep on the streets? Izuku's eyes widened, and he took a step back, hunching into himself, but Kacchan and Hitoshi didn't let him get far. Izu, it's okay, Hitoshi said, squeezing his hands lightly. It's just us. It's okay. I'm right here, nerd, Kacchan whispered at the same time. You can tell us anything. We've been through too much for us not to have that at least. Izuku looked around at everyone again, before he finally nodded again. Kacchan and Hitoshi immediately pulled him into a hug, and soon everyone else had joined as well, besides Namuri, who simply started rubbing an area of his back that wasn't covered in his friend's arms. The tears were quick to follow their affection, as Izuku nuzzled into his friends' warmth. He had missed them in the past month or so, and didn't realize how much he'd needed this. You're safe here, Oni-san, Eri said, tears evident. She was too young to know the implications of their conversation, but she had also been through too much in her young life. You'll always have a bed and hugs waiting for you. May chuckled. Yeah, and we're all here too. There's always a dorm room open for you to come to, if it ever gets to be too much. We've all been through a lot, so we all understand how hard it can be sometimes, even though we haven't been through the same stuff, Shoto continued. You helped me with my father, and we'll help you with your new parents and your mother. Izuku smiled through the tears and invited them all to sit in the living room with him and Eri to finish their movie. They formed a big cuddle pile on the floor after they pushed the coffee table out of the way, and Namuri grabbed more blankets and pillows for them. A small blush grew on his face again as Kachan pulled him closer and placed a kiss on top of his curls. Namuri sent pictures of the kids all cuddled up on the floor to Yamada and Aizawa, and when they came back a few hours later, the kids were all in the same position, fast asleep. A couple days later, Izuku was finally allowed to leave the apartment dorm and walk around with his friends around campus. It was Tuesday, so he'd also be returning to classes tomorrow, and he couldn't wait to get back into training after having a month-long rest period. Can we go by my dorm to grab some stuff? Izuku asked. I think I might spend a couple more nights with Aizawa and Yamada, so I need my school stuff and my notebooks. Of course, Shoto said, their group already turning directions to walk towards the dorms. Izuku had been enjoying the serenity of aimlessly walking around campus with his friends for about an hour now, and his friends had just finished telling him about the autumnal equinox festival. Izuku wished the other students hadn't been so mean while he was gone. He'd half been hoping that they'd stop after he was taken away, but he'd never been very lucky with his wishes. Oh, I got a new video game while you were gone, Hitoshi commented. I haven't really been in the mood to play it, but I had pre-ordered it, if you all wanted to play. Oh, Izuku said. Let's do that too. I don't have to be back with the teachers till later anyways. Sounds like a plan, Katsuki smirked, swinging his and Izuku's hands that were clasped tightly together. Just be ready to get your ass beat. You don't even know what game it is, May laughed. It's obviously some action game, Katsuki scoffed. We played Hitoshi's games too much for it to be anything but. Hitoshi shrugged. He's not wrong. It's the new modern warfare. Ooh, can we play Team Deathmatch? Izuku asked. I liked that the most on the last version. Yeah, sure, Hitoshi agreed. There's a lot different with this one, so prepare for that. Sounds good, Izuku laughed as they reached the dorms, and Kachan opened it, leading them all inside. Their mood instantly dropped as a plate dropped onto the floor, shattering. Izuku scanned the room and wished he'd had the forethought to prepare himself for meeting his other classmates again. Dude, Denki shouted, jumping up and running over, followed by Kachan's other friends. You're back! We missed you, Mina cried out. Yeah, bro, Kirishima added. It totally wasn't manly how the commission just took you like that. Izuku? Momo asked, coming from the kitchen with a shocked face, Kyoka following behind her. Hi, everyone, Izuku said nervously, glancing at the other people who didn't seem as excited about having him back. What is he doing here? Uraraka asked, making the group around him tense up. Well, Izuku stuttered. He brought his hands up and waved them in a jazz hands motion. Surprise! I'm not the traitor. How did you get out? Ida asked tentatively, looking like he didn't know whether he should run and get a teacher or not. They let me out? Izuku asked. Really, it's not that complicated, you guys. But you're the traitor! You sold off our personal information. You have multiple quirks, Uraraka shouted, angry tears filling her eyes. You betrayed us! Never mind, Izuku sighed. No matter what I say, you obviously won't change your mind. There's evidence stacked against you, though, Ojiro huffed, and gestured to his shoes, making Izuku freeze. You were obviously born quirkless, so being the traitor's the only explanation as to how you have a quirk, let alone multiple quirks. Oi! Kachan shouted, letting go of Izuku's hand, and stepping to the front of their group. How about you all back the fuck off and leave the nerd alone? Now Masa himself proved that the nerd was innocent for the charges against him, all right? He probably tricked the lovely detective as well, then, Aoyama cut in, eyeing Izuku skeptically. Based on the way he would analyze us, it would only be right that he analyzed the detective as well. Izuku rolled his eyes at that. Of course he'd analyze the detective as well. He analyzed almost everyone he came in contact with. This was just like dealing with the commission officers all over again, and he was so tired of it. Keep your emotions in check, Nine, Banjo warned. We don't want a repeat of the training exercise. Izuku nodded and slowly started taking deep breaths. Shoto must have noticed because he came up and placed a hand on his shoulder, Hitoshi doing the same with his other shoulder a moment later. If he could trick the teachers for this long, then it only makes sense that he could trick the commission and the detective, Uraraka agreed, going along with Aoyama's theory. Pink Cheeks, you better shut the fuck up, Kachan warned. He's got you wrapped around his finger, Uraraka complained. All of you! He's a useless, good-for-nothing villain! Their group could do nothing but watch, as Kachan rushed forward and collided with Uraraka. Students started shouting as the two threw punches at each other, but Izuku just sighed as he walked forward, shrugging off his friends' hands. I've had enough with all of you, Izuku muttered. His anger was brimming under the surface, but he made sure that he had full control of it before he released Black Whip and grabbed the two students. He pulled Kachan back to his side and placed a hand over his boyfriend's heart. Don't let her get to you. Nothing she says is true, and we know that. That's all that matters. Kachan slowly began to relax until Uraraka started shrieking. Let go of me, villain! Uraraka shouted, some of the other students also shouting at him. Stupid Deku! You know, Uraraka, Izuku said calmly, not letting either his boyfriend or Uraraka loose. I think that's the first time that you've used Deku as an insult. To my face, at least. He added with a shrug. Uraraka glared at him, but stopped shouting, so at least that was a plus. Yes, I was born quirkless, he said to the rest of the class, some of them letting out gasps. But it wasn't all for one who gave me my quirk. If any of you actually studied quirk theory, or, I don't know, used your brains, you'd realize that if there was one quirk that allowed the user to give and take quirks, then there'd be more quirks like that as well. Izuku, Momo started, but Izuku just held a hand up to stop her. And yes, I analyzed you all, Izuku continued. I've been analyzing quirks since I was 4, even before I was diagnosed quirkless. I showed each and every one of you these analyses, though, and never showed them to anyone else, not even to other students or teachers, unless you expressly asked me to do so, and were there with me. He looked towards Denki, Momo, and Hagakure especially, since he'd taken their analyses to Mei and Aizawa, upon their request. I never betrayed any of you, Izuku finished. He looked around at his old friends, and at the students who believed he was the traitor, not bothering to target those who were indifferent to the situation. No, I didn't betray you all, but you betrayed me, and that is not something I will forget. He turned towards his friends, who were staring at him in a mixture of shock and pride. Let's go get my shit. I have to talk to Dad about this, then we can play the game. He released his quirk and started walking towards the stairs, not bothering to look behind him, as his friends rushed to follow after him. Damn, Izuku, Hitoshi whispered. I didn't know you could be so scary. If Mineta was still here, he'd have pissed his pants, Kachan said, barking a laugh. I'm not scary, I'm angry, Izuku countered, stomping up the stairs. Yeah, sorry to tell you, Izu, Mei laughed, but those two go hand in hand for you. If I wasn't subjected to people that are scary when they're angry my whole life, I likely would have been scared as well, Shoto confirmed. That being said, I'm very glad that I'm your friend, and not your enemy. Izuku sighed, his anger slowly dissipating as he pulled out his phone, and found Aizawa's contact before freezing on the stairs mid-step, almost making Kachan run into him. Oi, what the fuck? I called him Dad, Izuku whispered in horror. The group around him broke out in laughter, and pushed him to continue up the stairs, and call who they now deemed Dadzawa. All right, listeners, this concludes Chapter 16 of The Fall of Icarus. Just a few more chapters to go with this fic. Let me know your thoughts and reactions to this one so far. I really like this chapter a lot, but I say that pretty much every time I do one of these. I genuinely think this was a great reunion chapter. We get the reunion between Izuku with not only just his friend group and Katsuki, but also with the rest of 1A. So we get to see all of those dynamics coming back into play, seeing where people stand now that Izuku's back on campus. And so I think the author did a really nice job of throwing all this together in one large chapter for us. Let me know those thoughts, though, in the comments below. And as always, thank you all so much for listening.